Hello. Making sure you can hear me okay? Awesome. Let's invite Melody and Melissa in. Hello.
Hello.
Awesome. Can you we can hear you well. I'm gonna go ahead and invite Melissa in. Give me 1 second. Hello.
Hello.
Awesome. Okay, just wanted to do an accessibility check. Can folks see Yolanta, our interpreter? You can hear me okay for those that, well?
I am good. This is Melissa. Thank you, Greg.
Okay. How about you, Melody?
My needs are met. Thank you. It's good to be with you all. But Instagram has this screen that says it's like a pop-up and it's not going away, so I can't see Yolanta and Melissa.
Okay.
It says Gregory wants you to be in his live video.
Okay.
Should I hop off and hop back on and see what happens?
Well, we prefer this sequencing for video purposes.
Okay.
And so if you hop off, then we would have to redo it. So let's see. But we want to make sure that we are suited best for the conversation. So if it's helpful to hop off, then we'll ask Melissa to also hop off, and then I'll invite you all again.
I'm so sorry. Is that okay with Melissa, even though I can't see Melissa? If someone can indicate for me.
Absolutely. Yes, Melody, this is Melissa signing. Absolutely. And the comments are actually blocking Yolanta's sign. So maybe if we can move Yolanta to another spot, we can all have access. So that would mean that Gregory would be first, and then Melody. I'm sorry. And me. I would be last, actually. So Gregory, then Yolanta, then Melody, then me. Is that how we just did it?
Yeah, that's what it is right now.
Okay, I will hop off and look forward to your invite. Be right back.
Okay.
Gregory, this is Melissa again. So is Yolanta on the right side for you? Because
yes.
Yolanta's not on the right side for me. She's being covered up by the comments and the stream.
Yolanta's on the right side of me right now.
Okay, that's not where she is on mine. I'm actually on the top right on my screen. So here's what I'll do. If you'd like to continue with that. Oh, and Melody has just left. We can continue with that, and I can make it work.
Okay. I believe the way that I see it is how others will see it. I saw in comments that, maybe we can confirm. And then because Melody hopped off, if it's okay, Melissa, we'll ask you to hop off as well. so that we can re-invite Melody and then you to make sure that you won't be blocked by the comment.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Greg. I'll see you in a moment.
Okay, is that better now?
Much better, thank you.
Awesome. Let's re-invite Melissa. Okay, I'm gonna try one more time. Okay. For some reason, it is not letting me. Oh, there you go.
Oh, it's still switched around.
Okay, doing another access check.
This is Yolanta. I'm hearing some static. I'm not sure if that's on my end or elsewhere.
Let me see. I don't know. I can't tell. Okay. All right. Are we okay to get started? Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this special conscious conversation. And as we took some time to ensure that our guest and interpreter were set up appropriately and to try to ensure as much access as possible. That's something that we believe in and are working towards. I'm particularly excited about the guests for today's conscious conversation, folks who we have been in community, we've been working on an exciting project, which we'll learn more about, and who have done a lot of work and shared a lot of space and been in community in their own right. And so I'll read a little bit of their bios and then invite them into the conversation. But just welcome, Melody. Welcome, Melissa. Super excited to have you all on today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'll go ahead and start with Melody's bio. Melody is an educator, a speaker, a therapist of color, and mental health liberation activist. They founded Inclusive Therapists, a directory and community that centers marginalized communities and connects them with therapists. And as a strong believer in mental health justice, they created a nonprofit branch of Inclusive Therapists, Mental Health Liberation. Melody has used their time and knowledge to lead a movement that decolonizes, disrupts, and dismantles oppressive mental health practices. I'm now excited to introduce Melissa. Melissa is a deaf, disabled, queer, mixed, Latinx, non-binary femme, and an accessibility activist and access coordinator in LGBTQ spaces in San Diego. They also serve as accessibility coordinator for the People's Collective for Justice and Liberation and Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting, and several queer and trans spaces across the country. Melissa believes accessibility is a wide-ranging social justice issue that intersects with other forms of oppression and discrimination. They strongly believe in the power of community and the importance of networking and building support systems to thrive and connect with others. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Gregory, for inviting me to share space today. It's such an honor to be with you all.
To start us off, I'm going to ask a question that we asked all of our guests. And the question is, who are your people? So why don't we start with Melody?
Thank you, Gregory. I sat with that question. So I will first say my people are Hong Kongers. If there are Hong Kongers in the midst, hello, I see you. And in the greater circle, I would say queer, non-binary, Asians of diaspora, and I'm also in community with other queer, trans, non-binary, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and honored to share spaces with our communities.
How about you, Melissa? Who are your people?
My people are deaf, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, hard of hearing, late deafened, Black, brown, mixed, queer, trans people who have been marginalized and their lives have experienced less privilege and less access, maybe not less access, but limited access. And those are my people. Those are also folks that are often ignored and pushed out.
Well, maybe bring those folks into this space and hold them extra close, especially as we engage in this conversation and talk more about our exciting announcement that we'll be sharing in a little bit. My next question is for you, Melody. What led you to become a therapist, and more specifically, a mental health liberation activist?
Where do I begin? I'll start from the professional side. My journey actually started in education. I was a teacher at one point, and when I started to see the ways that trauma and relational or family problems impacted students' learning and wellness, I thought, wow, in order for these students to thrive, that they are so deserving of support within the home and also in their communities. And that inspired me to enter into counseling and therapy. But my journey into activism was actually finding myself as a student in school, becoming training to become a therapist, and seeing how few of us there were, and both in our classrooms, in faculty, in curriculum. And I thought, surely there are spaces for us. And then thinking ahead, thinking, how does there being, so few of us in the field impact the work moving forward? So as I became a therapist, seeing the disproportionate, impact that structural violence has on our communities, but also the disproportionately small number of us in the field, I started to think, this is not sustainable. How do I be a part of this work in community building, in extending healing for our communities, and to uplifting future generations of emerging therapists as well?
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Melody. Um, in a similar vein, Melissa, would love for you to share what led you to become an accessibility activist and coordinator.
Oh, that was a happy accident, Greg. I was actually leaving an abusive relationship back in 2014, and I decided to become involved with, at that time, I identified as a cis person. And when I was getting out of that abusive relationship, I spontaneously decided to become involved with the queer trans communities as a, and I use quotes when I say a cis ally. I coordinated for my own access, for meetings, for planning meetings, for events, and so forth. And I found myself doing all of this labor and seeing that my access preferences were not always met, nor were the other deaf, deafblind, deaf disabled folks that were met in spaces with me. And their experiences and access were not centered. They were marginalized as well. So that's a story for another time that I can go into even more, but that pretty much tells you how I got here.
I can say, Melissa, as someone who has learned so much from your leadership and sharing space with you, and the importance of trying to increase access, that I am grateful for how you have been so patient and willing to help others understand, and for the work that you do and the labor that you offer to make more spaces, to increase access in more spaces. So thank you. Um, the
Thank
the
you,
next
Greg.
question the next question for you, Melissa, is can you tell folks a little bit about Healing Together and what inspired your vision to start a mental health fund that centers deaf, deafblind, deaf disabled, and or neurodivergent communities?
Oh, before I go ahead with that inspiration, I'd like to be clear that I am not a mental health professional by any means. I am an access coordinator that happens to experience mental health struggles. I've received services from a variety of providers, and each of those providers has offered a different experience. One of them did sign, however, they were a hetero white individual, and that was not representative of me. Another therapist of color was somebody that I worked with who was wonderful. Unfortunately, did not know sign language. So those experiences were very divergent. My vision came about when a very dear, beloved friend was having a very difficult time getting services while experiencing crisis. And this friend was very clear about wanting a Black Indigenous therapist of color who signed and had to navigate their insurance network to try and find somebody. And in trying to help them with support in finding an appropriate therapist and calling the insurance system, I was met with barriers. And that friend didn't have the capacity to try and deal with out of network details, monies, etc. They didn't have funding to pay in advance of services. Another friend went through a deaf-owned therapy agency, and back then, this particular provider or group of providers told my friend that they had to contact their own insurance and figure it out on their own. So, with a little sauce behind my email, I sent them a message saying that when somebody is going through crisis, the last thing that they are able to navigate is the system and insurance and so forth. And then when you add into it insurance lingo, first of all, I don't think anybody understands insurance lingo, never mind somebody from a marginalized linguistic community. You know, like it sort of feels, for lack of a better term, a very sterilized environment to try and contact somebody that often speaks through scripts. So again, I saw their identities and their experiences being decentered. And both of them wanted queer therapists, not just Black, Indigenous, and or therapists of color, deaf and signing therapists with specific understanding of locale or specialty, because they would be trauma informed, or and content warning for those who are watching, for folks who have recovered from sexual abuse, people who specialize in that type of care. And that's not always possible for the folks that I have mentioned. And as an access coordinator, I noticed the barriers that included BIPOC, deaf, queer folks, typically, in my experience providing access, we're using Medi-Cal, which is a California insurance, or Medicare. And oftentimes the access to therapists in general is very limited. And then for BIPOC, deaf, queer folks wanted BIPOC, deaf, queer signing therapists. And that was not often, if ever, an option for them. The deaf community is already very small, and there's a conflict of interest if you happen to know somebody who knows somebody, or it feels very vulnerable sharing your lived experiences with somebody who might know somebody in your circle. So while providers may have accepted insurance for some of those folks, interpreters weren't available. And if interpreters were available, they weren't necessarily culturally competent. And not all therapists wanted to advocate for folks on their behalf. So it became more of a systematic barrier for folks to get access. And ultimately, what that meant is that insurance companies were not also educated in language access and would give us a hard time when requesting services, again, while experiencing crises and or mental health issues. Providers are not always educated or familiar and willing to accommodate. And I actually knew somebody who found a therapist they really liked. And because that friend didn't sign well, they said, would you mind using the chat feature while we communicate virtually? And the therapist said no. And so all of these denials for access were what I collected. And I reached out to you, Gregory, and said, please, let's figure this out. Help figure this out. And then this beautiful creation started with Melody, and the three of us have shared space. And I'll let Greg and or Melody take it from here and fill in the rest.
Well, just to name, just to share, the name of the collective effort is Healing Together, Accessible Mental Health for Deaf, Queer, Trans, Non-Binary, Black, Indigenous, People of Color community, which has been a labor of love. And yeah, I will invite Melody, who's been a critical partner through Mental Health Liberation, to share a little bit about their experience in the process, and invite like what drew you to this, and what has been your experience in this process so far.
Thank you. Firstly, it's a joy to work with such lovely humans, and just feeling really honored to be invited into the process, and appreciating the trust as well, and building these relationships. As I reflect back in my journey as a therapist and entering into advocacy and activism spaces, one question I always ask myself is, what are the ways that I perpetuate harm? With the assumption that by default, our mental health field perpetuates harm, marginalizes, neglects, silences, attempts to erase, and that is all by design. And so if I take the responsibility and accountability to work against that, then I'm a part of that system. And in being invited in, one thing I really needed to examine is my internalized ableism, and also how by design I'm ignorant. And part of that is my personal accountability, but also we are not equipped, and that's by design. We are not trained, and that's by design. And I could have waited to say, let me learn more first, let me get educated before collaborating. But I also believe that if our pain and our injuries are collective, then so is our healing. And I believe in the power of collective healing. And so I simply just asked, what can I do with my limited abilities to be able to come alongside this vision? And so part of this is being humble to guidance and to learning, and at the same time, uplifting each of the different skills and abilities that we bring in. And I love the process of learning to rely on one another and coming up with creative solutions together.
Absolutely. I know I've appreciated this process because it's been a community of learning, a community of like trust building, community of practicing what it means to be in solidarity. And I would love to invite, maybe we can start with you, Melissa. What is a lesson or what is something that you've taken so far? Because clearly we are on a journey and the journey is going to be ongoing, but we have spent, we've been in space and shared community for some time together. And I would maybe invite each of you to share, like, what is a lesson or what is something that has stood out in the process so far?
This is Melissa. I realized that I forgot to add a little bit more context about some of the details, if you will. So Can't Stop, Won't Stop, Gregory and I had actually interviewed other centers for mental health providers, and we reached out to lots and lots of folks. And inclusive therapist was the one that just kept coming back to our intuition, to our heart, to our mind, because of how they center individuals' lived experiences, how they support BIPOC-led initiatives. There were other places that may have been deaf-owned or deaf-run, and they were very cisgender, very white, very binary. And so we connected in these ways to make a bigger impact so that we can educate, support, provide training by deaf mental health providers, deaf individuals who will train working with therapists, working with service users or clients, however folks prefer to be referred to. And we see this really incredible intent. I'm very intentional in everything that I do, and I partner with inclusive therapists for all of the reasons that I mentioned. And my ADHD is coming up again, Greg, and I don't remember the question.
No worries. The question was, which I think you kind of integrated into that additional context, but the question was if there was a particular lesson or anything that has come up for you as we've been in this process together.
Oh, yes, realizing that I couldn't do everything myself and asking for support, reaching out to other Black, Indigenous folks of color like Topher Gonzalez Avila, Alsasha Clay, Noel King, and several others that I would like to say I'm so grateful for reaching out to others, whether it be in language assessment, applications, really everything you can imagine. Making sure that language is clear, accessible, getting feedback from a variety of folks, and of course, and again, emphasize the centering of Black, brown, deaf, queer folks and their lived experiences. And to just remember that access needs come first.
Absolutely. And I just want to also say thank you, Melissa, for lifting the context around the intentionality of reaching out to inclusive therapists, mental health liberation, and to also just thank Melody for being willing to meet with us, for taking a chance, and for being able to build relationships and trust in this process. We definitely appreciated just the questions you asked, the way you have shown up, but even the way that you have interrogated or offered what a potential partnership could even look like. And really appreciate to Melissa's point, the intentionality and how this has come together. And would invite you, Melody, is there a lesson that you've learned or anything that has come up for you throughout this process that you'd like to share?
Thank you. My heart is feeling warm. This has been a, a very humbling process, and at the same time, an exciting, invigorating process that we're collaborating to co-create something new and different, and we're integrating our imaginations. And want to thank Greg and Melissa and Yolanta and Stephanie and others that have been consistent in our meetings and believing in this vision. I think one of the many lessons I've learned is to continue to center on lived experience, and what does it mean and to be invited in as an ally that doesn't share lived experience with queer, trans, non-binary, BIPOC folks that are deaf or hard of hearing, and kind of being receptive to feedback, being open to correction, and at the same time, not being timid as well, and choosing to be brave to offer some of the skill sets and know-how that I have about the mental health field. And I'm seeing almost as like puzzle pieces of coming together and connecting and building something that's shaping up to be beautiful, and I'm excited to share with folks.
I love the analogy of being a puzzle, and how the pieces are coming together. Thank you for sharing. The next question I have is for Melissa. It's clear that community is significant to you. In what ways do you think building community can help tackle inaccessibility?
I believe in collaborating, centering Black, brown, mixed, two-spirit, LGBTQIA, 2S plus folks, their needs, building trust, creating relationships, educating folks about the importance of access as the norm, and to ensure that access is happening. This world is not built for disabled folks, period. So I come into every scenario with a disability justice framework so that I can lift and hold the lived experiences of deaf, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, deaf neurodivergent individuals who are Black, Indigenous, people of color. And again, I don't believe in leading. I believe in collectivism, and I believe in taking this on together as a collective. And like Melody said, that's how we heal. We heal together. And we just have to connect with our people in order to do that.
Absolutely. I loved how you weaved in even the name of the collective project. Um, you know, you both described experiences either from your own experience or experiences from folks in community around that lifted up the how mental health and other forms of healthcare are not accessible. Um, in what ways do you think healing together can address some of these things or help improve access to mental health and mental health justice to the communities that we've been centering and talking about? Maybe we can start with you, Melody.
I'll attempt. I see it as threefold. One is addressing the structural barriers. Melissa named some examples as finance. There's also time. There is space barriers. And how do we address those barriers so that to bring more ease into the process for folks? That, yeah, I'll pause there. Another layer is the relational barriers that we're addressing, that finding a therapist that is culturally responsive, identity affirming, and are also doing their work and are committed to our collective liberation is, it shouldn't be so difficult. I just want to emphasize again, it's by design that there are so few of us, that there are a lot of limitations placed on us to prevent us from challenging the system. And so in addressing these relational barriers, we're also doing the deeper work of examining why is our field as limited as it is, and what are also some longer term visions that we have to shift the field together. And the third area is going back to collective care. Earlier on in my journey as a therapist, I used to ask myself, as I'm in the therapist's chair, how do I work myself out of a job? What would the world look like if there wasn't a need for therapists? And more recently, my question started to shift. I started to ask, what would it look like if each of us was equipped and accountable to tending to one another's mental wellness? That being a so-called therapist or healer should not be exclusive to people that have the training, but how do we equip all of us, especially in uplifting deaf, hard of hearing, disabled, QTNB, Two-Spirit, LGBTQ+, BIPOC folks. Thank you, Yolanta, for quick spelling. And so, yes, I feel that invigoration in tending to our communities, and I am imagining what this could be as a movement as well, as we all become more equipped and accountable to one another.
I really appreciate the reframe of the question around what would it look like for each of us to feel equipped and accountable. And it reminds me, of the concept of like community care and collective care. And if we actually invested as much in the care of others as we did ourselves, like how would that change the conditions that we are living in and being in? And so thank you for sharing that and offering that. Let's go to you, Melissa. Would love to hear like what do you feel Healing Together is addressing, and anything else you'd like to offer to this conversation.
Oh, I imagine this could mean that our deaf communities can enter spaces where they get therapeutic services without any worry of copay, finance, insurance. Am I covered? Am I in network? I also envision that these therapists are the perfect fit. They don't have to worry about identity affirming. They don't have to worry about lived experience. And that all of these folks can be in space that provides care in the area that these folks need. And again, content warning for folks who are watching, when an individual experiences sexual violence, childhood sexual abuse, eating disorders, trauma, PTSD, any of those specific traumas that they've had, and these therapists have tools like DBT, like things that really work for particular communities and can communicate in folks' language of preference. Not just ASL, that folks can communicate in Mexican Sign Language. They can communicate in British Sign Language. If they're in England, they can communicate in a variety of ways, whether it be typing in the Zoom chat. And that deaf folks don't have to worry about whether or not they can trust their provider. They know that they will be confidential. They know that their stories are not shared.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Melissa. I share many of the hopes that you both laid out, and if we are able to take the love and the energy and the community and the solidarity that we've been able to build as we put this together, help bring that to the broader world, I believe we could be able to make all of those visions and hopes become a reality.
Absolutely, absolutely, with many exclamation points.
I'll just take a moment to just share with folks. I think we've alluded to different components of what the kind of elements of the initiative, but I'll just name them now so folks are clear on what those are. So one, it's going to be establishing a fund to provide therapy to Black, Indigenous, people of color, Two-Spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, and agender, plus deaf, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, and hard of hearing folks. And I think it's always important to name all of the things, the letters, so I just wanted to just give it its honor. The second element is building a more accessible and specialized directory of BIPOC, 2S, LGBTQIA+ signing therapists, or those familiar with deaf, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, and hard of hearing culture. And then the third element of the initiative is partnering with organizations and collectives who are advancing disability, racial, and broader social justice. So those are elements of healing together. With that being said, I wanted to also to ask this question because clearly we are still navigating a pandemic. There has been racial uprising, and I think there's still many folks who are going on their own journeys of what they how they understand the impact of the systems the oppressive systems that we are living in and part of, and the overall kind of cultural and political moment. Um, how can you all speak to how these conditions have increased the need and also increased the inaccessibility of mental health services and mental health justice? And how do you feel like these conditions influenced the plan and the creation of Healing Together? Maybe can we start with you, Melissa? Is that okay?
I would love to start with Melody if that's okay with you.
Okay.
I'm in the thinking process right now, so I appreciate the pause.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm not stalling. Something that I and many of us have observed is the compounding toll that constant crisis has had on our communities, especially marginalized communities, communities that are disproportionately impacted, but also marginalized from care. So as this impact compounds, that puts a toll on us individually, but also in our families, in our communities, on the planet, and beyond. And there are glimpses of hope that I see. For example, the increased awareness of the ways that structural oppression impacts marginalized communities and our mental wellness. There is an increase sometimes that I see of mutual aid, for example. We may have more shared language to put name to what we may be experiencing. But that is really just starting to scratch the surface. If we were to wait for the mental health field to catch up to what deaf, disabled, queer, trans, non-binary, Black, Indigenous, and people of color have already known through our lived experiences, or also through intergenerational trauma and historical trauma, we would have to wait way too long. And so what I'm appreciating about this project and Melissa's lead is Melissa's invitation in to collaborate and co-create is responsiveness. That even if we don't have it all figured out, the reliance on our relationships and community to figure it out, because we cannot wait for the mental health field to catch up.
Absolutely. Do you are you ready, Melissa, to share some reflections?
I am. Thank you, Greg. Just as Melody said, the mutual aid is actually how I started out. And I started actually trying to raise money for a friend to get mental health services from a provider that they wanted, and they knew exactly who and what they needed. And then another friend came about and was struggling to get services here in San Diego, which is where I am currently housed. In San Diego, there used to be a mental health services provider, and unfortunately it's disbanded. All of the therapists quit. And there's no director for behavioral health or behavioral science. I'm not sure the exact terminology for this particular position, but there was nobody there to to provide mental health services. And they couldn't even share the information with all of their patients, that the existing patients that they had, that their therapists quit. And so that was another moment when I reached out to Greg and Can't Stop Won't Stop, and I said, we've got to change this. And that's when the story that I shared earlier today with you happened.
Absolutely. I'm continue to just be grateful for the invitation to be a part of this, for the vision that you offered, and for the ways that you both described, like how the potential impact that this has, and even in just coming together in trying to figure it out and understand what we need and how we can actually make this, at least put the initiative together. I've already learned so much, and so I hope that I believe that we'll be able to find a way to kind of transfer or help others see the vision and the energy in the community in solidarity of healing together. The next question that I have is, there are lots of folks tuning in now. We will also be posting this, so there'll be a video available for folks later. But I imagine folks are wondering, well, what can we do to support healing together? And so what are some of the ways that folks can support this new and exciting initiative?
I can start by mentioning some ways.
Okay.
Please do, Melody.
Thank you, Melissa. One way is to, if you have the means and the ability, to start a fundraiser or to donate. There are a couple ways to do that. You will find a link in my link in bio. Feels so strange to say. Or through Mental Health Liberation's link in bio, you will find a link to our donor box where we are accepting donations, but also to amplify our initiative, click the I want to start a fundraiser, which is completely free to do, and to share that with your communities. And if you, especially if you have a special event or milestone coming up, this can be an opportunity to share with others our initiative and to bring their support our way as well. Another way is to visit our website, mentalhealthliberation.org, and to sign up for our newsletter, where we will keep folks updated on the status of this co-creation. We will notify folks when we are ready to extend care and other ongoings that we have. So sign up for our newsletter. How about you, Melissa?
Thanks, Melody. We're also planning to reach out to potential partners for this initiative to join us in our programming. In addition to that, very soon we will be ready to share the link for applications for BIPOC deaf folks to sign up. We will also have support ready if there are folks who are not comfortable with written English. We will have interpreters provided for folks who would rather respond in American Sign Language. So we are providing that as a means of access. And I want folks to stay tuned for that coming soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Melody and Melissa, for sharing that. The other things that I would also offer or invite is, if your organization is connected to either potential service users or service providers and would love to be a Healing Together partner. And a partner would really just mean help us get the word out when the application and the links are ready, and even to start just helping get the word out about the a fundraiser and the donation link. All of the funds raised are going towards the mental health fund to ensure access for service users that need it. And all service users must identify with all of the communities that we have named. And so that is also part of how we will prioritize the resources. I'll say that our starting goal is going to be $25,000. And so we are going to be needing everyone to help support, to help get us to that initial goal. I believe we can get there, and I believe that we will get there. All of your support. All right, so the last question that I would love to ask is, in just terms of as we get ready to close out, is there anything else that you all want to share or offer, anything on your mind that you'd like to share with folks who are tuning in now or who will see this at a later time?
This is Melissa signing. Personally, I want to say thank you to Yolanta, to Stephanie Chow, who is one of the other interpreters sharing space, Topher Avila, Latasha Lane, and I'm forgetting someone. Help me out, folks. Noel King. Noel King. Yes, and all of those other folks who've been a part of this initiative in supporting this incredible vision of mine. I am so deeply grateful to you, and most especially to Melody and Greg from Inclusive Therapists and Can't Stop, Won't Stop. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for supporting this initiative. I am beyond excited to see what we can do together.
I want to echo the gratitude that Melissa shared. It really does take a community to create something beautiful, impactful, and thank you, Melissa and Greg, for your invitation and for trusting me in this process. And we have a community behind us too, the Inclusive Therapist community. And for folks that are tuning in, just want to acknowledge that there's a lot going on out there that is painful, that is hard, that many of us may be feeling fatigued, especially during seasonal change. And so if you're feeling stretched, I just invite us to make time to rest, exercise your right to say no or later, and that your wellness is a priority.
What a beautiful way to help close out this very special edition of Conversation. Thank you again to Melissa and Melody for sharing space today, helping make this exciting announcement about healing together, accessible mental health justice for deaf, QT, MB, BIPOC communities. Thank you, Yolanta, for helping increase access of our Instagram Live. And thank you, Melissa, for also being the accessibility coordinator with Platforms Consulting, where we strive for all of our Instagram Lives to have a ASL interpreter. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll post this video, and we'll also post the link to the donate link if you want to either donate, to start a fundraiser, or to share it. And feel free to follow also um, all of us here, but also Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting, Can't Stop, Won't Stop Education Fund, Inclusive Therapists, and Mental Health Liberation for additional updates, other resources, and to be in community with us. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll be in touch.
Bye, everyone.